the Starr Conspiracy and the content channel, Hey, Brett Starr. I'm Brett Starr. This is Long Strange Trip, Episode 6.
Hey, Ashley, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you, Brett?
Good. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this crazy experiment and whatever this thing is that we're calling Long Strange Trip. But I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be able to spend this time with you because we haven't been able to spend a whole lot of time together. And so it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I've been a long time since I've been a Starr Conspiracy listener of the podcast, and it's cool to be kind of in the world. I'm inside the magic box.
Awesome. So we have one listener. How did you find out about the Starr Conspiracy, and what were you doing before that?
So I actually found out about the Starr Conspiracy purely through actively job searching. I think it was on LinkedIn. I had been freelancing for the better part of the second half of 2020 and was really enjoying it, but missed out on fully participating culturally somewhere.
Do you feel like the company that you read about when you're going through the hiring experience mirrors the company that you're actually working with now? I mean, is there, or was it a like jumping into a cold lake and it was like, this is really different than what I thought?
No, it's actually, it was pleasantly surprising at how, at the transition. I feel like it was kind of the best of all worlds of a lot of my experiences. But no, it was not. If anything, I had my expectations exceeded because I had no idea how fantastic the people were going to be that I was going to become teammates with, people that I've never met in person with, that I'm already kind of developing, friendships with or like chatting with on Instagram. And there's a really welcoming culture. Like that culture was very surprising and very different, but in a good way. It made any shifts in the work easy.
So going back in time, at what point did you realize the pandemic was going to change everything?
My real breaking point was when my son, who is sensory sensitive, he was 7 at the time, he's now 9, had to have dental surgery. And he like full anesthesia, completely under. That's something we had never experienced before. And also because of the pandemic, we could not be with him in the traditional way that you would be in a surgery setting. So we were at Children's Hospital of Atlanta, CHOA, which is amazing. And they were fantastic. They let them bring in a teddy bear, etc. But having to drop him off, my husband was allowed to go in the waiting room, but I stayed in my car, took a meeting from my car, finished out a pitch deck from my car that morning. Then we went home. My son is recovering from anesthesia. I'm much more upset than I thought I would be. Have a client meeting that afternoon that I take from the floor of his bunk bed where he's kind of in the background, and trying to get this really wonderful, like charitable virtual event going because the date wasn't going to change. And I had an actual literal meltdown, like a mental health meltdown. And I have a really amazing therapist. I'm a big proponent of mental health, love it. And I was seeing my therapist pretty regularly. And at one point I actually called her in crisis and just being like, I was in my closet, curled up in a ball, like crying because I had this full day of meetings and my son needed me. And my therapist was like, honey, this is not going to hold. Like, you're going to have to rethink this, or life is going to rethink it for you. And we're going to actually have to talk about you spending some time somewhere, like, having an inpatient experience, because I'm super concerned. I weighed like 100 pounds at that time, even though I was working out of my house. So that was the big record scratch moment. But if you have any follow-up questions, we can get into that.
I just, I think there's so many things there to unpack. First of all, I'm sorry you had that experience. Second, you're not alone. I mean, so many people, including myself, had experiences like that. And, I like to point out when people talk about panic attacks that if you've never had a panic attack, it is like one of the most debilitating, frightening things you can ever experience. I've had social anxiety disorder my entire life. In my late 20s, it moved into panic disorder. My first panic attack happened at work in an elevator. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was dying. And then for, 2 years after that, I couldn't get them under control. Almost wrecked my car in Boston, driving down the pike because I started to have one. And just the sense of dread that they could happen at any moment and then being in one was, to this day still, one of the most uncomfortable, scary, terrible, just experiences that I've ever had. So I really empathize with the panic attack thing because, man, those are rough. Reading a lot lately about the mental health impact of the pandemic around the globe. And there's this big debate going on about, whether or not the pandemic has led to post-traumatic stress syndrome. And half of the, medical psychological world says absolutely. And the other half says, well, let's look at the definition of trauma. And that has to be an acute reaction to an event where, the real risk of death or, something like that was true and imminent. And so, the pandemic doesn't apply to that. And I'm like, fuck that. That's bullshit. Because I had like 5 traumatic events,
Yeah.
and just the overall pressure of the whole thing the whole time, for me is classified as a traumatic event because at times I thought the risk of death was very real for me, my family, people I knew, all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of unpacking and work to be done around that. Talk a little bit more about how your outlook on life and what your life goals are has changed because of the pandemic and your experiences.
I think, again, one thing that I was able to really separate both emotionally and professionally, kind of, you touched on it a little bit when we talked about how creative advertising traditionally can create these structures of scarcity and the idea of chasing opportunities, the idea of subjectively being someone's favorite, and that somehow means that you're talented, and that somehow means that your art is good, and that if your art is good, you are good, because wounded people become artists.
Yeah.
And it's that chasing of external validation and the entire time that I was doing that in my traditional advertising career, and I've never been famous. I've never worked on any like famous brands. But that entire time that I was in that space, I was looking for that external validation that I was good, that I was smart, and other people telling me that is what would make that true. Mm-hmm. And so that led me again to be, chasing briefs, chasing, human networking type of relationships and doing whatever it took to kind of get there. While I was doing that, chasing what they call sexy brands at work, I was also leading really important B2B accounts for the agency that nobody really creatively wanted to touch. Nobody thought it was fun. Nobody thought it was cool. It was never going to be on the Super Bowl. You were never going to make commercials. And even though I was doing all of that other chasing, I was also building that brand and building that client relationship. And it was so rewarding. And, we were able to evolve a company's, entire voice, the way they talked to the brand, the way they act in verticals. And that was fulfilling, but nobody thought it was cool in the places that I was working. And, nobody was going to be jealous of the work that I was doing or, want to be where I was at. And when I was sort of in that space of what am I going to do now and what's my life going to be like, it was, again, what do I want to do and who do I want to be and what do I want to be around? And I love that the head of Eaton Automotive Marketing or B2B marketing thought that I was one of the best copywriters he had ever worked with, and that it helped their brand. That is meaningful. Whereas, your commercial might be in the Super Bowl, but like 10 people know your name.
Yeah. I think that's to me, the way I hear that and the way I process that is that people kind of fell back more on, purpose and values and stuff like that instead of that external, validation. And I just love, kind of what you said, because clearly you're a great writer. If you look at the hiring experience that you have to go through to get to the Starr Conspiracy, if you look at the people that you're surrounded by, you're, truly world-class. We have amazing people. And all we have are B2B clients. And, there's always been this perception that, the best of the best go to, B2C firms, and they work on, big, sexy brands and all that stuff. And over the last 20 years or more, we've just been quietly, working with these amazing brands that are becoming household names, because we care about what they do, which has kind of changed the world of work, right? And so I think that by following our purpose as an organization, it does create at least the opportunity for people to feel that their work is significant and important, because I think it is, but in a way that is not, based on trophies and, plaques and stuff like that, but actually seeing the changes manifest in the world, that our clients have been wanting for a very long time.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. What was the weirdest or funniest thing that happened to you during the pandemic? Do you have any great memories or just absurd moments?
I'm trying to think of if there's anything completely absurd. I did. This is ridiculous, but I mean, it's weird. So I live in Georgia in the suburbs. We're in a cul-de-sac of a new construction neighborhood. And then so we're in the cul-de-sac against a tree line. And then there's, some woods, and there's actually a little creek that's part of our property. But then past the property line is an individual, like a private, like one home, and they own the rest of the land. And they're, excuse me, their kids ride their four-wheelers around back there. And we had been, and we don't know them at all. We've never met them. They're far ahead of us. And I was super bored and also super burnt out. It's actually I keep looking this way because I can see it from where I'm sitting. I'm in the same chair that I was when I got this idea. One day I was super bored, feeling burnt out. We'd all been cooped up, and I was like, I'm going to go get in that creek. I was like, I'm going to go get in the creek. We've owned this house for a year. There's nowhere to go. I own part of a creek. I'm gonna get in it, because I mean, I grew up, in rural Georgia. I played in creeks as a kid. I actually used to have a pretty good Georgia drawl, and so I tell my husband and my 7-year-old at the time, I'm like, we're gonna go out in the creek. I'm gonna put on these like rain boots, and we're just gonna go. And my husband is like, well, you're not going by yourself. And we open up the back gate of our fence to kind of go in, and it's all just like brambles. There's not even a trail, and I'm like fighting through this. And I had already kind of gone to a happy hour, so I had a couple of glasses of wine, just a couple, and I'm like fighting through this bramble, and we're stomping through this creek, and my son is with me, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm like, I'm gonna go, walk up this way, I'm gonna go walk up that way, and not really paying attention to the property lines or whatever. And then all of a sudden, we see this dude with a gun.
Welcome to Georgia.
I know. Kind of standing up ahead. And again, I have this like sort of friendly, like southerny, and also, hey, we're all in this together, where he was like, this is private property. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I get it. I'm sorry. There's just not much to do. And my husband was like, zip it. He was like,
well, so I'm going to ask you now, you came from, a couple of different work environments during the pandemic, right? So there was the company that you're working with, and there was freelance experience. What was it like when you came into the Starr Conspiracy and saw how we were, living, during the pandemic and working and stuff like that? Because part of this is to, kind of figure out what I got right and what I got wrong, and what we got right and what we got wrong. You weren't at the Starr Conspiracy when we were experimenting with some things. We're experimenting with things now that you're here for, but you walked into, an organization that had already changed pretty significantly during the pandemic, and we still are changing a lot and will continue to change a lot. But what was the experience like coming to the Starr Conspiracy at that point? That was the summer of 2021.
It was, I don't want to seem like effusive or, like I'm plugging, but it was this sort of breath of fresh air in that I finally felt like I was not in a fully reactive space. And I had freelance clients that were not reactive, that were steady, but it was still very hectic. And it was this idea of, one, that I felt safe because of that. And I do mean like emotionally safe, like safe to be authentic, safe to communicate. But the other thing that I found the most invigorating and that allowed me to feel, comfortable was the lack of, no one was protective about anything, right? No one, there's usually, when you're onboarding somewhere, this idea of like, okay, you have to figure out, like, read between the lines, like, who's in charge of this, who's really determining what's going on here.
Yeah.
We know the company line is, we're all in this together or something, but there's always something else going on. And figuring out really quickly when people are being protective of information because they feel like they're going to lose opportunities, or they're being protective about how things should work. The openness to share, whether it was knowledge or work or opportunity, was just like so refreshing. I felt immediately like I could be authentic, and that was actually what was wanted from me, instead of saying that was what was what was desired, and nothing, and that not coming to fruition. And which is, again, people and culture based, which might be, again, being picky, I think, can be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the changes in your life that you identified was that you really needed and wanted flexibility. And we do a lot of odd things at the Starr Conspiracy in terms of how our days are structured, and we have a 3-day weekend and stuff like that. I think it's important for people to hear from folks who are, working in that world. Did you get, really, this is not a commercial. Did you get the flexibility that you were looking for? And what impact do you think that has on our company's ability to do a good job for clients and, grow and succeed and all that stuff? Because a lot of people are scared to do some of the things that we did.
Absolutely. Yes, I am getting that flexibility. So I am a mom, and I'm able to, I take my son to school. I pick him up from school. If I need to, I can switch with my husband. We have quiet time, which I think maybe if you want to know the reaction or what's good, or do those things work, or are they great, is anytime I talk to someone about how the Starr Conspiracy is structured, in that we have 2 hours of quiet time a day, that we have a 4-day work week, that we don't do, traditional performance management, that we don't do traditional tiered management structures. Like, a lot of jaws drop, and it's like, seriously, why is that? Why can't I have that? And why is that not available everywhere? And like, damn, I wish that the place I worked could do that. And I'm really proud to tell people that, but also, yes, like, the time is amazing. The time, even just for my mental health on Fridays, to be able to, again, as a person that's very prone to anxiety, very prone to getting overloaded, that I have an opportunity to let my nervous system chill out. I do better work, and I get more work done.
So I'm curious, what do you think we got wrong, have gotten wrong during the pandemic, and are still doing wrong?
I think one area for improvement, which I think we're working towards, is, knowledge sharing from the deep level of expertise that comes from some of our senior leadership to some of our newbies, meaning that we have so many people on our team, like you and Steve and Lance and Tony, that have all of this insight into the work tech space specifically, and not just that, again, you're reacting to things, but that you have these really strong, amazing outward POVs and insights that you're able to organically draw based on your experience. And I think getting more of that knowledge sharing or help finding a way, I don't know any other way, right? It's like learning a language. One day you just dream in it and you know it, but being able to speak very proactively and insightfully on the industry. Like, I think a lot of that we could build that skill more, but I don't even know exactly what the best way to do it is. I really want to go to HR tech.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, again, is finding those opportunities, and there are no closed doors. And I think we've been working on some of our weekly retros, shifting to knowledge sharing and implementing more blogs, internal blogs, and more internal resources. But I think us knowing about what those are, or knowing how to start forming those really deep insights would be great.
How do you think clients react to the way the Starr Conspiracy works and walks through life?
What I love about kind of the way that I personally have not felt any pushback. Again, I'm not on the account side. I don't necessarily have as many day-to-day interactions, but I find that, again, our client interactions are very, I don't know if flat is the right word, but they're very collaborative, and it feels like we take on clients that are like-minded. So in many ways, our clients, I feel like, respond well to what we're doing. And it's because we view work and the work experience the way we do that makes us so good at working with these work experience brands or HR related brands. And that there's that authenticity there. So I think much like in the candidate experience when you're applying, I feel like we're pretty straightforward about, this is what we do, this is who we are, this is what we do and don't compromise on. Like, are you down for this?
Yeah.
And if you're not down for this, cool, no worries. But that to me is, I think, why our client relationships work so well and why we're so collaborative with our clients. It's not, we own you and we're the hands of a client organization. It's very, no one's telling us what to do. We're working together, and it's truly like a consulting engagement and not a studio full of, yes, that's the right idea.
Hey, what lessons do you think you learned during the pandemic? And, I specifically want to put this in the context of, is it possible that the pandemic is going to make the world a better place?
That's a fantastic question. It's possible, right? But I have a tendency to, I don't want to I know that things can change, right? So there's an optimist and an idealist inside me that absolutely says that yes, that there's all of this possibility for positive change. And even, I'll go ahead and get a little more granular. I think for a lot of human beings and how they view themselves and how they internally reflect, that will improve. What we're going to have to grapple with is, how we externally relate with all of this trauma, with all of this change, with people, going through something like a pandemic and changing and reassessing how you feel about things and reprioritizing your life can be really confusing for some people, depending on their environment or what they have access to, that sorting through it can be really difficult. So I think that there's going to be this heart of goodness, right? This heart of positive, empathetic change that's going to live in a lot of humans as individuals. And that a lot of us will be better day to day within ourselves and how we treat our families. It's how we then process that goodness in a collective way that I think will make it feel more pessimistic than it could be. I know that seems so esoteric.
What an amazing, that was an amazing insight. I've not heard that before. And I'm going to kind of feed it back to you in the way that I interpreted it. Because I think it's brilliant. Self-actualization, really went up, the number of people who became, reached the top of the, the pyramid and the hierarchy and became self-actualized or learned things about themselves. Even about their families and, the groups of people that they're very close to, that definitely went up. But there's this creative tension between the self-actualization and what we know to be true about ourselves and what we strongly believe, and the ability to relate to other people who also are, self-actualizing and have different attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs than we do. So it's interesting because I think we know ourselves. Many of us know ourselves or feel we know ourselves a lot better than we did before. Unfortunately, on the pessimistic or bad end of that, self-knowledge has increased the space between us and caused many people to kind of search out more folks that they kind of feel are like in their tribe, from an attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs perspective. And that's kind of, compacting and compounding a lot of, kind of space between people who just kind of believe different things. I don't fucking know, one day I'm like, this is going to be with all, caveat, all the terrible things that we experienced, all the terrible things that happened, all the people that we lost, et cetera. Some days I feel like we're going to come out of this thing, closer and better. And sometimes I feel like, we're not. And the gulf is just going to continue to grow between different groups of folks. And, I don't know what to do about it. Is there anything that you wanted to say about your experience during the pandemic, or advice that you would give to other folks that you didn't get a chance to?
No, I will say that the one other thing that I didn't realize until you and I got ready to speak, and I was thinking about all the things that we might possibly talk about, is that because I try to make meaning, or I try to focus on what I can control and not be overly pessimistic, I did not reflect or feel the huge sense of loss that I actually have had over the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not what I want anymore, the idea of how I thought my career was going to go kind of ending. My father passed away from COVID, complications of COVID. Thank you. It's another wonderful example of the Starr Conspiracy just completely rallying around me. But I looked at those as one-off events, right? I looked at it as like, oh, my father passed away. Oh, my husband got furloughed and he had to rethink his job. And my son hasn't had these types of experiences that I had growing up. And it's all just like, oh, one more shitty thing. Yeah. And as I was falling asleep, I was like, wait, this is all collectively very painful. This is all like, what? I never, in 2019 when I was packing up my work space at the place that I was working physically for a 2-week work from home break, I had no idea, like absolutely no idea, the magnitude of of what this would be. And again, like you said, I'm only really starting to understand that, you know, that sort of snowball effect. And I also think that it makes for great content, and I speculate too, and it's fun to speculate, but I mean, there's no way the ball is still in the air.
Yeah,
Like,
it really is. It really is.
So,
well, I'm so grateful for the time that we spent together today. I feel like I know you a lot more, and that's a real gift. So thank you for that.
I'm grateful as well. We ever went in the creek?
Well, you know, it's funny because I grew up in South Texas. I live in Fort Worth now. And, you know, people who have never lived in places like Texas or Georgia don't understand, you know, they may think that this is like really strange that somebody would approach you with a gun on their property. It's not actually that strange. Going back to a comment that you made when we got started and how long it's going to take for people to kind of make sense of, you know, this whole period. I think it's going to be the next generation's job, you know, to look back and make sense of all this. But a lot of it's going to be grounded in like pop culture and stuff like that. So when you see a show like Euphoria, or you see, you know, just where, you know, like Don't Look Up, or, you know, the movies and the songs and, you know, the shows, everywhere you see this evidence of, you know, people, you know, falling into extreme patterns of behavior. As we're talking about it, I think it probably comes down, like it's always come down, to what you choose to see and what you choose to find. You know, I tell my kids all the time, you always find what you're looking for. So if you walk out the door, you know, looking for people who are angry, you're going to find a lot of them. If you walk out the door looking for people who are smiling and happy, you're going to find a lot of them. But you're always going to find what you're looking for.